Hey, this is episode number 56 of Gen X Amplified, and today we are going to chat about an often overlooked topic in the workplace, but one that is very important and one that I am extremely passionate about, and that is ageism. Because I will be joined by Walter T. Geer III, a leading digital advertising executive whose viral post on social media ignited a conversation around age, diversity, and inclusion, and how we as leaders can ensure this remains top of mind in today's world of work. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
I'm Black. I have to deal with being Black when I go out into the world and doing my thing. You might not deal with that, but I'll tell you one thing we all will deal with is ageism. Right? We will all get into that opportunity where you have to sit in front of someone else who's half of our age.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified. This is the podcast dedicated to highlighting and showcasing and empowering the very powerful and exceptional generation between those brilliant boomers and magnificent millennials. And as always, I like to thank you for listening, to subscribing to the podcast, and being along this movement and this journey with me. I truly appreciate it. So today, I am really excited because I'm about to have a conversation all about diversity and ageism and 40 plus and being dynamic and all that good stuff that I enjoy, because my guest is a digital advertising executive, multi patent holder, and is currently the SVP Group Creative Director at TBWA WorldHealth, which is a leading healthcare agency collective. Now, as mentioned, he holds a total of not one, not two, not three, but 6 U.S. patents for digital ad formats, and has developed ad products and implemented strategies for a variety of publishers and tech companies and media companies, including some you may have heard of, such as Google, Viacom, and New York Times. Now, he also shares an immense passion for diversity and inclusion, which also focus on eliminating ageism in the workplace, which we're going to talk about. So without further ado, please welcome my Gen Exceptional guest, Walter T. Geer III. Walter, what is up, man?
Hey, man, how are you? Thank you so much, Adrian, for having me on this podcast, man. I'm excited to be here. So again, thank you.
It's my pleasure.
And that was a hell of an intro.
Oh man.
I'm like, man, I feel hyped up right now.
Hey, well, you gave the intro credence. I had to have something to introduce. And let me just say, so first of all, your name, Walter T. Geer III. You have a name that sounds like someone that holds several patents. I mean, that's just pretty.
You know what? I often get the like, well, is there going to be a fourth? Like, absolutely not. No.
Oh, wow.
It gets crazy, man, with like credit and all that stuff. Everything gets mixed up, man. It's a mess. So for folks thinking juniors and all that, like, don't do it.
Don't do it. Well, I have a son, I have a daughter, I have a son, and we gave him his own name, and probably because I'm just like cocky like that, I want my own. No, I'm just joking.
Nothing wrong with that.
I am joking, but anyway, hey man, it's a pleasure to have you on, and I tell you, you're someone that I actually just recently met via the interwebs, and I tell you the impact that you have made, not only in my life, just from consuming your content, from having a conversation offline. It's been very immense. So I was excited to have you on. And you know, my passion, my mission is to illuminate the awesomeness of the 40 plus audience. And I tell you, you're definitely a gem in this jewel box of Gen Xers. So let's unpack this. So first, before we get into some of the things I mentioned earlier, such as the focus on ageism and age diversity, would you mind just kind of walking us briefly through your personal and professional journey, just leading to your current role as a advertising executive, multi-patent holder, and a disruptor and a champion for D&I?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Look, I've been in advertising for about 20 years, and oh my gosh, it just sounds like so long. But it's flown by really quick. And the truth be told, I got out of college and I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I was kind of home, sitting around doing nothing, going to movies and just random stuff.
Right.
My dad was an engineer for GE for years, and guy I always kind of looked up to and idolized. So I always thought that maybe one day I'll be an engineer. One day, literally told me, you should get into this web design stuff. It's blowing up, and it was like '99 with it. .com bubble was happening and so on and so forth.
Right.
He told me, hey, I got you an interview. Applied, with your resume on whatever, monster.com at the time, to this company called Transworld Entertainment. At the time, they were the largest music distributor in the world. So Clearly we know what way they have gone by now.
Of course. Right.
But yeah, I went into this interview and like, honest to God, it went something like this. Do you know HTML? I was like, yep. Do you know JavaScript? Yep. Do you know Photoshop? Yep. Cool. You got the job. When can you start? 2 weeks? It's like, 3. I did not know any of that. I had no, like, HT what? Like, I didn't even want to repeat it because I thought I'd get it wrong.
Wow.
I went to a library, 3 weeks, studied, got on the job, continued to learn on the job. And that was it. I had a guy that I admire to this day, a creative who was there, who kind of like showed me the ropes when I was there. And that was that. But that's kind of where it started. I went on to, doing a lot of front-end development and design for various amount of companies, but shifted my kind of career when I got to Viacom right after being at Google. Okay. And it was interesting about being at Viacom was that it was the first time I had the opportunity where my boss literally said, we need you to create inventive stuff, like do stuff that's never been done before. And how do you help us generate incremental revenue? Okay. And it was the first time I've kind of taken on this role where I had to now be this kind of big thinker. And I think that what was interesting about it is as I started doing it, I realized, oh my gosh, there's so many people out here that are, excuse my language, but throwing shit at a wall and hoping it sticks by coming up with these big ideas that no one can really guarantee are effective. Right. So I came up with the idea that why don't we test this stuff? So I started doing I created one of the first biometric usability labs with MIT Labs. And what it allowed us to do is understand the emotional state of an individual when they engage or interact, in our case with brands and with ads. And I was pulling things like heart rate, pupil dilation, arousal, which is sweat in the palms, facial expressions. And through this, I could essentially create the perfect experience, right? By way of this came several patents that you spoke of earlier. One of which is the skippable pre-roll, right? Like everyone sees it every single day. You watch a video, gives you an ad, then it gives you the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and skip. Right. So I've done that. I worked with a team when I was at the New York Times where we invented surround sessions. That's the ads. It bothers everyone. It's like, go to a site to look at something, you're shopping, whatever, you leave, and it seems like that product is following you everywhere you go. So I've helped some, I've done bad for others, so I apologize to those listeners. And long story short, I've been in the ad tech and publishing world for quite some time, which led me over to the agency side here, TBWA, WorldHealth. And, it's funny because like I've done all this inventive stuff. People say, well, why did you go to health? Because like health is like everything's so slow. And I am like a fixer at heart. I like to kind of get in, find a problem, identify it, and work on it. Okay. And I thought that this would be the perfect opportunity to really be inventive and do stuff that's unique for some of our brands. Okay. But more importantly, like I work with people who want to make change and who are striving for disruption. That's what we do at TBWA. So it just couldn't be a better fit for me and an opportunity to do shit that actually makes a difference, because I was putting people, feet in sneakers, ass in cars, in jeans and all that. And like, for what? Right. So this is the first opportunity I've been able to take what I do and help like create opportunities that change people's lives and things like, cancer and all kinds of things. So it's been really an exciting year. Wow. To say the least. Wow. And you wrote that, you said year, which that's around the time you've been at TBWA, correct? Yes. About a year. Yeah. Just about. Something, just going back and thinking about your story, man, you definitely have disrupted. And it's interesting, just call out a couple of things that you mentioned early in your journey, how you pretty much learned on the job. You were self-taught. I hate to say the phrase, but fake it till you make it. And in a way you did, right? 100%. I will totally own up to that. But just the confidence that you had in yourself, that you knew that if you did the grunt work and go, like you said, went to the library and looked up HTML
self-taught yourself, but not only did you do that, you had to perform. So obviously what you did and the education and the tools that you learned obviously were effective. And there was something else that you mentioned, how you describe yourself. You are a fixer at heart, and you strive, and you love working with, and you want to work with people and to make change and strive for disruption. And was that something that's been innate in you, Walter? Would you say your entire life? Did somebody kind of reinforce that was close to you? Like, how did you become that?
That's a good question. Ever since I was young, I was always into like fixing things, building things, whether it was blocks or like, I remember my parents when I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade got me this little thing where you could like put these wires together and create the opportunity to then, send a signal to a radio, and it sounds like you're like on the radio, speaking, and so on and so forth. I've always been someone that just likes to fix things.
Okay.
And when I went to Viacom, like up until that point, New York Times and Google, I had been an individual that was always handed stuff. Here, do this and fix this or adjust this. But when I went to Viacom was really where I had an opportunity to just kind of like go outside of my comfort zone and be responsible for coming up with some of these ideas. And for me, that changed the whole kind of directions in terms of my career, my confidence, because of the boss that I had, I was able to learn a lot from. And I was really kind of in this mode of just craving, like doing something different, doing something unique. And then truth be told, like when you're tying revenue to it, it was exciting for me to be able to like create a product for McDonald's that sold for like $4.5 million to run like 5 or 6 times on the site. Like that was crazy. Right. So there were different things that drove me, but at the end of the day, it always led back to how can I do something that's different? How can I do something that someone else isn't actually doing?
Well, that's amazing. You've worked with some really fascinating brands. I mean, I've been fortunate and blessed to be able to work with some really good companies as well. I'm looking at your resume, and it's second to none. You talk about the Googles and MTV, which is Viacom owned, MySpace, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't met many people that have actually worked at MySpace. I think that's pretty fascinating. Can you just, what was your main takeaway from that experience? And then obviously the transition to most people utilizing the Facebooks of the world, and MySpace was actually the first ones, including Friendster and so forth. How would you talk about that experience at MySpace?
I don't think people will have a real, genuine learning opportunity, like experience, unless they have been at a company that is plummeting. Because what I learned there was probably more than I learned at any company I've ever been at. I sat through, in my 3.5-ish years there, I sat through 4 different CEOs that were all trying to throw the Hail Mary pass. I went through a sale where we sold to Justin Timberlake and Specific Media, which then became Viant, which then became, a part of Time. It was just a really amazing opportunity to see how quickly a group of individuals would pivot to try to head the right direction and kind of follow the ball. I mean, truth be told, what MySpace did, Facebook did that was so good is like they focused on one thing, right? Let's do one thing really well, the activity stream, boom. And at MySpace, we were like 35 things. It was like, get your music, make your page. Here, find out about some news. Oh, you want to learn about your horoscope. So it was just like a lot. And I learned about like the, when and how quickly you should be making decisions and kind of sticking with them and moving forward. Because like we sat on a lot of these older designs for quite some time because everyone was passive to make a decision on kind of making these drastic changes, and no one wanted to be responsible for making these changes. But I would say it was amazing. I would say it was an incredible opportunity to really get in and sprint kind of towards a fix and or sale. It was fun.
Man, that's very impressive that you described it that way, and I understand. It's to say that you think about MySpace and people will look at that externally and say, oh my God, it was a failure. But obviously, there have been many businesses that have failed or have evolved. But your experience, you took some learning key lessons from that apply to business, apply to life. Yeah. I mean, for me, I've worked in executive positions in the past and worked in marketing departments. And you mentioned something about focusing on one thing, and that could be a challenge for many leaders, many companies. And there are companies that do many things really well. However, the true people that have succeeded and the companies that have really succeeded, have started off focusing on that one thing. Like, even though people look at Amazon now, they do, and I love Amazon as far as I'm a Prime member, they do so much, but my man Bezos, it was all about books. It was all about books and dominating the book market. And then he expanded. And so interesting that you took those lessons and you learned from that, and you went and you learned. I'm sure those lessons took you to your eventually to your next role, and you were able to take that in life.
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, people often get afraid of being at these companies that are failing, and what am I going to do? I have to worry about getting laid off and let go.
Right.
I think that there's a point when you get to in your career where, and excuse my language, like you just stop giving a shit about all that, right? It's like you go in to kind of work on something, create a solution, and just like whatever happens, happens. I'm the type of person who like, I don't worry about what happened yesterday. I deal with the present, and what happens tomorrow. You can't change it.
Right. Well, interesting. That's a great transition, because speaking of getting to a period and stage in your life and age. So obviously the listeners of this show know why Gen X Amplified exists, and they know my passion and how I'm trying to affect change. And I've gotten to a point in my life, being a 40 something, where I really want to do something purposeful and really help people that are in that Gen X generation, even beyond, even the boomers and 40 plus. And I came across this post on LinkedIn, and I'm going to, for those listeners who may not have read it, which I can't imagine, because the thing has gotten like 3 million views on it and it went super viral, but I'm gonna read it because it's very succinct and it's not a long post. So it starts off, 40 under 40 and 30 under 30, I'm not impressed. Show me 40 over 40 and 50 over 50. Put a spotlight on the hard work that this group of individuals is doing while juggling life at home with a spouse and kids. That would impress me. Who's going to step up and own this? Is there not any talent over 40 that deserves to be awarded? Do you agree? And then I think you tagged Ad Age, Forbes, Ad Week, and that was it. Short, sweet, not a long post. You would think that maybe get a couple of views.
Yeah. I
went in and I can't remember what the view count was at the time, but I think, and you may know it as of right now, at one point this thing got up to like 25,000 likes or loves, almost 2,000 comments.
Yeah.
Can you first?
Crazy.
So crazy. So, and I chimed in obviously with some good comments, and I was like, oh my God, he's speaking my language. So Walter, can you just talk about, first of all, what was the motivation for you to put your fingers to the keyboard or your phone and type this post? What was going on in your mind at the time?
Yeah. So as I said before about my not caring, right? I have diarrhea of the mouth. So I have a tendency sometimes of just saying whatever's on my mind, and I think that at times that works. Sometimes it might not work, but I think at the time I had seen so many posts on social media that were kind of going back to or referring to like 30 under 30, 40 under 40 submissions and awards. It was like that time of year,
right?
They're coming through, and and I'll say it again because when I made the post, there was a handful of folks who kind of brought it back to, oh, is this about award? No, it's not about an award, right? It's not about that at all.
Right.
And I personally have never even really cared about an award like that. Mm-hmm. If I got one, great, but I just hadn't cared, right? Or given it that much thought. So anyways, I had just gotten kind of annoyed with it, right? And so I kind of took to social media, LinkedIn, and kind of just did this post, just said whatever was on my mind. And that was that. Honest to God, like, I just expected maybe a couple of my friends to weigh in, make a little kind of, replies, go back and forth, and that'd be that.
Right.
It was like a Friday night. I went to bed around 7 a.m., 7:30. My cousin screenshotted me, a picture of the post. And it might've had like 1,000 or 1,500 likes at that time. He's like, yo, do you see this? And I was like, kind of half cross-eyed because I'm tired. I'm like, whatever. I opened up the app and I couldn't believe it. And this thing just took a life of its own. But what was really like interesting to me is not like the amount of likes and all that stuff, but like the amount of people that actually reached out to me to tell me their story, because there was thousands or whatever that were commenting on that with their stories, but there were so many. I mean, I got hundreds of people sending me personal in-mails telling me about their experiences at work. And one guy telling me the fact that he's 50 years old. He's been in the advertising world for 30 years. senior executive, lost his job 5 years ago, couldn't even get a single interview over the past 3 years. And because of this, now having to work a night shift at a warehouse to essentially pay bills for his family. And the fact that, like, because of his hours, the immense amount of 70, 80 hours a week he's putting in, he only sees his kids on the weekends.
Wow.
So it was really, that it surprised me, because I knew that ageism was a thing, but I didn't know it was that much of a thing. Like, it just took on this kind of massive life of its own. And it was just really amazing to me that people would divulge that much information about their personal lives to someone they don't even know.
Right.
So it was amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing, to say the least. I tell you, and again, it caught my eye, even at the point of, I can't remember, I probably chimed in early on during the post, and because I do have a fascination and a passionate belief in eliminating ageism as much as possible, because that goes concurrently with my mission of helping people in mid-career and midlife really thrive, because we are now that 40 plus stage. We're now in what we call the traffic jam of life, like you said in the post. Like, we're, a lot of us, not all, a lot of us we have kids and we have families and we have jobs and we're trying to make ends meet. And again, just full disclosure, that doesn't mean if you're under 40 that you don't have those dynamics, because I want to make sure that people, it's not just people 40 and above have all these different dynamics that are affecting their livelihood. But a lot of us in this stage in our lives have that, but at the same time, you don't see a lot of the focus on this, especially in the middle, especially kind of the 40 to 55, which is the area that I really focus on. But 40 and up, 50, you don't see those awards. When I saw that, I thought it was an amazing post, because it was short, but it was to the point. And I chimed in and said, I'm so glad you did this. I think I sent you a private message, man. Hey, this is so great. This is so, because I'm very passionate about this. Yeah. And at the same time, it's funny, because in full disclosure, I've actually received one of those awards. It was back in 2010. I got a 40 under 40 acknowledgement from a publisher of the Network Journal, and actually was on the cover of the magazine and blah blah blah.
Nice.
I got it.
Congrats. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong, but it's funny. I got it at age 39, so it was like the last. It's my son. My son joked with me at the time. He was probably, how old was he? Probably like 3. He said, "Man, you just got in, Dad. you just got in."
It's funny.
And it's funny, and I enjoyed it. It was pretty cool to be acknowledged, but. Obviously, through the advent of this show and in the work that I do now, focusing on helping people in mid-career and midlife thrive and turn mid-career malaise into mastery, which is really my mission. Obviously, me being 40-something now, there is a void in the marketplace of talking about the virtues, not only of people in this season of life, but also how do we handle the challenges that come along with that and remedy that and shine a light and amplify the voices and the virtues and the skills and the excellence of the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. So when I saw it, I thought it was excellent. And the stories that you mentioned, people that reached out to you, I think what you did, Walter, is that you provided somehow, it's almost like there was a lock on the door, and you somehow with this post had the key that unlocked the door, and you provided a safe haven in a way, because obviously it's kind of that viral coefficient, if you will, in the social media world, that K factor. When so many people started to comment, it kind of gave validation for people that may not have said something before, but it's like, you know what? Okay, now this is my chance, and I'm going to do it publicly, or I just may do it privately, like you said, the private message. Yeah. And there's so many stories out there. I made a post actually today at the time of this recording. I posted a post about me. I was speaking at a panel, and I talked about my focus on age diversity and why it's really critical that companies look at their workforce. And there are many Gen Xers and Boomers that are doing excellent work. It is something that's there. Now, have you personally experienced ageism in the workplace, Walter?
You know what? I'll be honest with you. I don't think so. Okay. I don't think so. Look, fortunately, I kind of have somewhat decent genes, right? So like, I don't necessarily look my age, thankfully. But like, but the thing is, I've experienced what it is to be Black, right? Yes, and I think that there are differences, yes, but there's no difference in when I walk into an interview and someone sees my resume, Walter T. Geer III, right? They're not expecting a black guy to come walk in the room, right? Mm-hmm. And I know the feeling of sitting down and that uneasy kind of like, all right, this feels a little awkward, and I'm sure it's very similar to, 45, 50 or 60-year-old individual who goes in to interview for a job and gets that same kind of feeling and or vibe. So when I look at this as a whole, like, look, diversity and inclusion is a big topic of discussion. Everyone's talking about it right now. And yes, and I think it's extremely important that we focus on people of color, right? Women too, but also like we do have a tendency of leaving out ageism, right? And yes. Ageism, and I tell people like, I'm black. I have to deal with being black when I go out into the world and doing my thing. You might not deal with that, but I'll tell you one thing we all will deal with is ageism, right? We will all get into that opportunity where you have to sit in front of someone else who's half of our age. I talked with a woman who told me she was like 55 years old and she was a copywriter. And she literally said to me, you know what? I sit down at a table where like 7 or 8 people around me are all 22 and 23 years old. And I feel like I just can't engage in these conversations. So because we just don't click like that because of our age difference. And now I feel left out every day when I come into the job because I can't have effective kind of, conversations with these folks. And I felt like at one point I kind of felt like, okay, well, when we work in the workforce, like, we need to be willing and open to kind of work with many diverse backgrounds, age groups, whatever. Right. But at the same time, I get where she's coming from because it's like, it would be nice if she had someone else her age or someone that looked like her that sat by her, right, to conversate with. So, it's a struggle we'll all face at some point. And I think that the bigger issue is that this has been, especially in advertising, a major issue because of the fact that people believe they've put this kind of burden on people's backs to believe that, hey, if you turn 40 and you're not like a senior vice president and or above, right, then there's a problem, right? I had a close friend, a very dear friend of mine, who was probably in early 50s, who I worked with at the New York Times. And, I used to talk to him all the time about like, man, like how, like what, like you're getting all these promotions. Why don't you take them? VP, SVP, he was account executive. And he kept telling me, nope, I don't want it. And it just didn't make sense to me. One day he finally told me, hey, look, like, I don't need that. I'm one of the top sellers in the country. I come and go as I please. I kill my numbers. I make my money. I go home when I want. And that's that. I don't have to deal with the added responsibility of managing someone else or making sure they're hitting their numbers and or goals. And I'm happy. And it, like, when I was younger, I didn't get it. I was like, man, that's crazy. He should be an SVP. He should be a chief revenue officer. Right. But as I got older, now I realize like that makes sense. I get it. Right. And there are people out there like that, but you shouldn't put them in this box of like, oh, you're not this. So, you come this way. We're not going to give you that opportunity. Right.
Yeah. You're so right. There are people like that. I've known people personally that are around my age or even older or slightly younger, and there's this sometimes external pressure put upon them to be at a certain level at their job, especially if they're working in the corporate environment. And some of them are go-getters, and they want to go up the corporate ladder and get the VP gig or the SVP. Or some of them just say they're happy and content, but it's that pressure that's there. And it's interesting, even on your post, because I read a lot of the comments, because it was almost like a great market research study for me for what I do. I said, oh my God, this is like free content for me, because I love hearing seeing empirical data and stories from real people, so it can help me do my job better and serve my passion better. But I saw a couple of posts, and I saw something that you even mentioned in a publication about how sometimes people, or maybe someone younger, may say, okay, well, if you're over 40, you should be in leadership positions. You should be training the young people. You should be a leader. You should be the CEO. And I think your viewpoint is something like, well, everyone over 40 may not necessarily need to be in leadership position in the quote unquote C-suite level, because they may not either want to, or they may not be the best for that role. Correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, we're totally on the same page. And it's, look, it's not to say that these people aren't overachievers, right? My friend was certainly an overachiever. This guy would come in and just like do the most incredible work day in, day out. But like, not like me, I don't choose to be a CEO. I don't want to be a CEO one day. Right. Like that doesn't get me excited. For me, like, I just want to be able to go to some place where I can disrupt and do and have fun working with other really smart people, making an impact on people's lives. Like, so that's all I want. Like, I never chose to be like this C-suite or so on and so forth. If it happens, it happens.
Right.
If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Wow. Well, how do you think the industry, specifically like your industry, the advertising industry, because as you mentioned, ageism is very prominent in advertising. It's definitely prominent, in tech. And I work a lot with tech companies and media companies. It's a problem across the board. From your article, from your post, from this conversation, from the work that you do, well, how can the industry change? Like, what is it that you think the first step that people should do that are able to affect change, combat this stain called ageism?
So I'm going to say like this. I've gone to conferences and sessions and, after work stuff for diversity and inclusion meetups, right?
Yeah.
And when you go to these meetups, you'll have, all these head of diversity from, all these various publishers and ad agencies on stage talking. The entire audience will also be diversity and inclusion folks, or people like myself, or people of color and or women.
Right.
And the biggest problem, and it's almost laughable, is, well, we're just sitting here talking to ourselves. Right.
Yes.
So that doesn't make any sense. And I say that because, like, with diversity as a whole, then we shift over and start having this conversation about ageism.
Right.
The conversation needs to happen outside of people like me and you. Right. Like, the fact that the post was great because we were able to see people's stories, but like majority, like probably 80+%, 90% of the people that posted or made a comment on that post were probably above the age of 40. Then you'd see the younger ones and you could tell, because it was like they're very much like, oh, well, you should have this much experience, so you should be an executive, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So it was easy to kind of like see who was who or what age group some of these people were from. But I start with the fact that, like, there needs to be a better way to have a conversation with more people. And that's with diversity as a whole, right? So we can kick and scream as long as we want, but if someone else isn't learning and understanding some of the problems that we're going through, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
So, I say that because, like, it's that post for me taught me something that I didn't know. Right. So, like, every day for like a month and a half, I was, like, not even kidding, getting like 30, 40, in-mails a day, right? And over 100, 200 kind of invites to connect every day. And I was trying to read every single one and respond to every single one. And that was a learning experience for me. Now, again, as I said earlier, I knew that ageism is a thing, not such a big thing as I thought when I actually got all these messages. And I started reading people's stories and I thought, oh my God, it's horrific, and it's crazy how many people it affects. And people need to look deeper. Like, it just doesn't affect this one person. Like this guy who's working night shift, that affects his entire family. Right. Right. So we see companies like and I don't want to speak for every company and or agency, but like the thought is that they're saying, well, we'd love to have someone with whatever 15 years of experience who's 5 years out of college. Right. Because I can pay you less than I can pay this other guy over here. So I'm sure that's part of this, but I think it needs to start with education. Right. And more people need to have this conversation and keep this conversation going and tell each other about their experiences. Open up. I had a guy tell me in one post or directly to my email that, like, he explained his problems, but didn't want to post it on the thread because he thought that if someone else from his job saw it, he'd get fired. And that's crazy to me that you can't post that like publicly out of fear that you'll get fired for talking about the fact, you know what I mean? So it's crazy. So again, I think it starts with education. It starts with, how do we get everyone in the room to talk about this? Yeah.
Well, you said something deep, and I think you lit the fire and you got almost everyone in the room, at least on that post. But you're right. If it's just the 40 somethings and the 50 somethings talking to each other, which is still great because we have a passion for it, it still may not solve the problem. Just like to your point about diversity and inclusion in general with respect to ethnicity or age or orientation or gender, if everyone in the room is person of color or a woman, and the people that need to be in the room to help affect change are not in the room, then it doesn't get done. And the same goes with ageism. And you also brought up another point too, which I want to go back on, about you being, a black man and dealing with racism or the uneasiness of understanding being the only one in the room. And I've definitely have been there because I'm black. And so it's interesting. Like for me, a lot of what I do, I work with a lot of different people, and I talk about this all the time, pretty much a tapestry of whether it's ethnicity and gender, and focusing on people 40 plus, primarily kind of in that middle stage. But I tell you, I see a lot of the pain points that's so prominent with people that are 40 something and they're African American and it's a woman. And that's literally, and I say this again, it's not the only person that's attracted to, whether it's my podcast or my coaching or they have three strikes. No, that's my point, is that and there's so many people that go through this, that go through ageism and feeling of malaise and going through a midlife crisis in a 40 something of all races and all ethnicities. And it's interesting when I hear the stories of someone, and some of them are friends of mine or people I just met and that I've coached, the 40 something or 50 something African American woman, there's a lot that's there. There's a unique dynamic that's there, that, like you said, there's three strikes. And I think this third element, not by any means a level of priority, but this third element of age, which I'm trying to amplify, that's something that's kind of the hidden topic that needs to be illuminated. And so they're already dealing with sexism. They're already dealing with racism, or if it's not overt racism, there's just some challenges that are there, many challenges. But the fact that you're getting older and you're a woman, and maybe you may be showing some gray, and you're thinking, okay, now I have to color my hair, or I may be worried that I can't. There's a lot that's there. So I didn't want to go past that point. And I also wanted to acknowledge diversity and inclusion is a big topic. It's something that needs to be focused on. And I'm hoping as well, as we talk about age, and you said this earlier, we're all going to get old. That affects everybody. When you really think about ageism and coming of age, like, we're all going to get old at some point. That doesn't stop. And so we all share that commonality. And I say your post really did something amazing. And what I love what you said, Walter, you said that you learned, you found out something, you learned something you didn't know before. And would you say that thing, again, just to clarify, is it that you didn't know that this problem existed so prominently?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure
that's
I picked
what
up
it was.
on that.
And then, and again, it just touched me when it's different when you hear someone's story, man. It's different when someone tells you their problems and they're like inability to pay bills, like someone who's getting paid 6+ figures who now is like working at a Starbucks, like that, and has the talent to be someplace. So, I say as well, it's like, above just education, like the people that can fix this are the people that are in senior leadership positions. Okay. Right. It's like when I hire, I should look for someone who looks like that. Right. And I don't think that that's wrong. And God forbid if I sound like I'm like discriminating now because I'm saying, hey, I want to actually go hire someone who's 40 plus. Right. Look, talent is talent. And if that's the individual that comes to me, that's the individual I'm going to hire. Right. I was in my career being, black in advertising. I didn't have anyone to look up to that looked like me. Right. And I'm sure that like when you're as you get older and who do you talk to about your problems? Who do you go to ask for help with your problems? For me, throughout my career, I had probably 3 individuals who literally put me where I am today. Wow. Right. And if it weren't for them, I would not be doing this. I would not be on this podcast. They did not look like me, but they recognized my talent and looked past everything else and brought me along with on the ride with them wherever they went. Right. So I say that there are people who have the power to do that. Like I know there's a guy I work with at TBWA, this another executive, a white guy, who has hired so many black people of color at our agency that it's like between us, it's like an ongoing joke. You meet someone like, did so-and-so hire you? Did he bring you in too? But he's conscious of this and helping to drive and make a change. Right. So we all need to sit back and think about when we hire people, let's not exclude someone because of the way they look or their age, right? Talent is talent.
Yeah, talent is talent. I love you said that. And I would even triple down on that and also add not only getting them in the door, the 40 pluses, but when they're in the door, how do we continue to advance them or make sure they feel welcomed? Because there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people in that stage of life that either being downsized or challenged or not even given opportunities, and they're downsized and they're saying that, well, we're getting rid of this position or we're changing focus, and they come to find out many times that it's really they're just trying to start fresh or pay less. And again, there are business decisions that need to be made. Not to say that all of those incidents have to do with ageism, but people that are in the door that work for these companies that are trying to either advance or just trying to pay their bills, and they're feeling they're the outsider because they're in a room full of 20 somethings and 30 somethings. And again, this is not to knock the youth or knock millennials by any means, but you need to invite a very welcoming and productive environment, business leaders. Yeah. And there's a lot of wisdom that's there for 40 plus people, a lot of wisdom, a lot of opportunities to help shepherd and train or mentor the young, and vice versa. I mean, there's a lot that the millennial generation, the Gen Zs now, can add to the equation to the older generation. Trust me. And so it welcomes a very multi-generational approach, but specifically with respect to the topic of this conversation and the post and this podcast and what we're trying to do respectively. The people that are 40 plus, that are 50 plus, that are 60 plus, and especially in this day and age where we're living longer and technology has really shortened the lifespan, well, extended lifespan, I should say, but shortened the learning curve of technology. It's easier now. There's so much opportunity to really invite the conversation of age diversity. Man, I could talk about this all day.
You and me both.
It's really important. I love what you're doing. But before I let you go, there's a final question that I like to ask all of my guests on Gen X Amplified. And are you ready?
Shoot.
All right. So, Walter, if there was a song that would play every time you enter a room or when you walk down the street that perfectly fits you, your story, and the brand of Walter T. Geer III, what song would that be? What would be your own personal theme song?
Wouldn't it be amazing to be able to walk down the street with, what was it, like a Shaft band, like this band behind it?
Yes.
Oh, no. Honestly, it's kind of funny. I was about 3 years ago, I think it was. I was speaking at a conference in Miami.
Okay.
And I was one of the keynote speakers, and then they came, backstage, and they say, "Hey, you can have music when you come out on stage." And I was like, "Wow, I've never had that before." They're like, "Well, what would you like to have?" And I thought for a second, and I was like, Kendrick Lamar, Humble. Right. and they're like, "Okay, can you?" So got it to them. And then I walked out to them, and that has been the song I literally listen to every single time before I get on the stage. Every single time. Yeah. Every time. Every single time before I get on stage, I listen to it. And it's when I heard that song, I was in a moment in my career where like I had to learn to be humble.
Okay.
Right. And I think I've had a humbling experience with, being let go, not because I wasn't doing the job, but partially for the way I looked. Right. And I won't go into significant detail, but it was a humbling experience to come home and kind of finally be present with my family, because I, at the time, had traveled so much and been kind of like on the road every single week. And it was like this humbling moment of like, wow, okay, I need to learn to be present. I need to be, live more in my moment. And that song kind of like came about the right time. And that's been my go-to, man. It gets me hype every single time I get on the stage.
I love it. You actually have had a personal theme song, the opportunity to do that, being a speaker, and cool. So it's cool. Nobody pray for me. Nobody pray for me. It's been that day for me. I love it, man. This has been great. Walter, I tell you again, for those of you who the two of you on this world earth that have not read the post, you can definitely just check out Walter, why don't you tell everyone how they can keep in touch with you, reach out to you, get a hold of you, see what you're doing. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah. So I will say real quick, cheap little add on here is reach out to me on LinkedIn, Walter T. Geer III.
Okay.
Dude in a jean jacket and a hat, can't miss it. But I will say that because look, we have lots of opportunities at TBWA WorldHealth. When I walk around my halls, I work with 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds who sit next to me, across to me. We have a diverse group of folks and we're doing amazing stuff over here. So LinkedIn, if you check me on Instagram, I'm on Instagram all day long. Sad story. It is Third Geers, like the number 3 RD GEERS, Third Geers. So reach out, please.
Third Geers. That's pretty cool. I love that. Yeah, man, Walter, this has been great. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love what you're doing. Keep fighting the good fight, brother. And I thank you for being on Gen X Amplified, and thanks for spending time with me and our Gen X Amplified audience.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Take care. Okay, that was Walter T. Geer III. I love that name, by the way. Walter T. Geer III, the SVP Group Creative Director at TBWA WorldHealth. Such a great conversation, chat. We really broke down, some valuable nuggets around ageism, age diversity and inclusion, and how those of us who are 40 plus should be empowered to live our best life. Yep, that's right. That is what I am all about, as you know, and that's what this show is all about. So lots of great information. Thank you so much, Walter, for joining us. And make sure you follow Walter T. Geer III, as he said, on LinkedIn, on the webs, on IG, and check out what he's doing. And make sure you continue to champion the importance of age inclusion. And let's try to eliminate ageism in the workplace. All right. So as always, thank you so much for listening to this episode and for listening and supporting this podcast, Gen X Amplified. And don't forget, go to genxamplified.com to get the show notes. And also, if you enjoyed this content and you feel inspired and empowered, please go over to iTunes and give us a positive rating and review. That does help spread the word of Gen X Amplified. I would really appreciate it. Again, you've been listening to Gen X Amplified, the podcast dedicated to you, the powerful and exceptional generation between the boomers and the millennials. And remember, it's more than a podcast. It is a movement. Take care.